All righty. Well, welcome everybody to the last session. This is actually the fifth session that we've held for the Open Source Committee candidates for Intersect's general elections that goes for both committee and board elections. Do want to appreciate everyone tuning in, whether during or after the fact. And today we do have three candidates, a few familiar faces if you've followed along in the series here, that being John and Sebastian. And today we're joined by Philip, who is also part of the X-Space session that we held. So I will pass it off to one of these three lovely gentlemen here. Tell us some more about yourself, application for the OSC, and we'll go from there.
You want me to jump in?
Sure.
All right. Great. Well, my name is John Nickel. I am a senior software engineer. Have been in the PHP space, Web 2 open source community for about a decade. And I would say that in Cardano that I'm maybe a little bit newer. I've been around since 2021 as an investor supporting Six City Jimmy's project and some of the smaller projects in the Cardano space. I've started a couple of projects, the Liberty Project and Fightcoin, and I plan on using those as a mechanism for both creating and innovating software and releasing open source software. I've had a chance to be at one of the working group meetings so far, and I'll say that I'm reading through the material and learning and understanding. I want to be the person, if elected, that can advocate for best practices for community collaboration. I know that that's a big thing as well for other candidates, and I think it's a great field. So if not elected, I still want to take part and do what I can to help the community. Thank you.
Fantastic. Hi, everybody. I'm Sebastian. I'm on Cardano since 2021, full-time in the developer ecosystem. I'm team member of teams, a few teams in the ecosystem. One of those is Mesh.js, other is Gimbal Labs. I'm a recent co-founder of Andamio platform. It's a platform aimed to fostering collaboration among developer inside the developer ecosystem. And I believe that we can make a really good job cultivating collaboration among projects in the ecosystem. Yeah, that's for the moment. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, gentlemen. And Philip?
Hey, I'm Philip, the CEO and founder of Anastasia Labs. I've been heavily involved in the open source space on Cardano. I think when I first came to the ecosystem, that was sort of the number one concern I had, was that most of the ecosystem, dApps especially, were closed source. And this is a big problem for a blockchain ecosystem because the whole value proposition of blockchain is trustlessness. And you can't have a trustless ecosystem when everything is closed source. So there's no way to determine, whether what is supposed to be a decentralized application is actually centralized or not, or whether your funds are at risk to backdoors or things like that. So to move away from trust, we made it our priority to change that. And we reached out to basically every top DApp and spent a lot of time and money doing either R&D, free development work, free auditing, in exchange, basically incentivizing these apps to open source their smart contracts. And we received, a pretty good degree of success with this. Before we came, the top 5 dApps were all closed source. Now all of them are open source except for one, which is really nice for the ecosystem in general. And basically, Anastasia Labs will continue to primarily focus on increasing the availability of open source code, increasing standards for open source, and releasing open source tooling for the ecosystem. That's all I have.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. I'll throw a question right at everybody now that we are kind of getting to the end of the election cycle here. And I understand there's been some different encouragements and maybe some other things that have prevented a full knowledge. But from what you have been able to glean from working and communicating with others through these sessions, what you've seen as far as maybe on our open source pages or even just on our socials, what do you all see as the future for the open source committee? What are some main things for us to focus on as we move into 2025?
Well, I don't mind jumping in again, I guess. I would say that the open source committee, there's definitely a roadmap. So I do agree that from my perspective, the first thing to do is to come in and understand where we're at. I do understand that there's some key areas of focus. There's an open source strategy. And then along with that open source strategy, I've recently spent some time looking at the project incubation lifecycle framework and how that fits within the projects that I've been working on, which I'm very interested in. I think it's fantastic. Everything that I'm in is obviously in the growth or in that very, very early phase. And so getting to understand how projects grow and move along is important for me personally. But within back to the question with the committee, I think that the focus, projects being able to open source, I think the focus should be that along the lines of what Philip's saying. I think that the projects that are there need to open source what they have as much as possible. I come very much from the PHP community, and so I would like to see there be a series of very abstract PHP libraries that allow people to link in with certain, sort of like Mesh.js has a lot of the stuff available full stack. I like to see a lot of the back end be available to be implemented through PHP easily, just because that's of course my place of choice. I know there's a lot of developers in that space as well. I'd like to see libraries incorporated into Symfony and Laravel so that it's easy if you're just going to see what does it take to build in this ecosystem. Wow, they have stuff for Cardano. That's great. Like that would be something I would love to see. Another thing is I think I've heard a lot of what Sebastian said throughout this time, and I would say that I agree 100% with the stuff that he's been saying in terms of getting projects to collaborate. The Liberty project itself is also designed to be a space, not necessarily. There's a Discord. We haven't minted anything. There's regulations in the United States that make some of this stuff difficult, and it's not a very active Discord. But the idea was always to get project leaders together, and we happen to have a lot of artists available that are into the NFT music space, specifically in Cardano. So it's sort of, we've started out in a little bit of a niche, but I think that the more that these project leaders can share, understand where the technologies that they need to use overlap, and can open source tools that help each other, the entire ecosystem is going to grow a lot faster out of all of that. And so I do think that there's a lot of growth, the lifecycle framework, and maybe even new libraries and the maintenance of those libraries. Also the idea of how we can manage maintaining these libraries in an open source fashion and have governance be a part of that. I think that's very interesting as well. And so I think those are all really kind of key implementation areas that I would like to kind of focus in on regardless. And then just the end of that, just to say that I also think that combined with all of this focus on growth, all the stuff that we're doing in the open source community, I think it also needs to be tempered within the idea that that we don't have an unlimited treasury. I know we're not the budget committee or anything like that. I understand that we're gonna probably work within the means of what's provided for us. But along those lines, I do think it's important not to try and overextend or not to outgrow the capacity of the treasury at this time. And so I think working with what we have is important, and I don't mind volunteering my time. So I appreciate it, and there's some incredibly every single person I've talked to on this committee are involved in this way is passionate and seems to be trying to do the right thing. So that's it. Thank you.
Yes, I share the sentiment of my colleagues. I think with the activation of governance on Cardano, we have a 2025 full of opportunities to create new ways of involvement and building trust among the ecosystem. It's not a secret that currently there are several teams and developers that they have not enough trust in how the governance is starting to be shaped in some way. I think we have this opportunity to build a conversation in the ecosystem with the devs and teams and start to gain some builds in together some kind of goals in common and how we can support together in going into the same goals in general. I think the open source office is doing a great job trying to incentivize the contribution and the maintaining of the projects. I think this is a good starting point to start providing some kind of professional security among the maintainers community in general. And in my opinion, we have really good an environment where we can try and test some things, build some opportunities, and start deep conversations with the developer teams on Cardano. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Looks like we may have lost Philip there for just a moment. Christian, any questions for our candidates that we still have?
Yeah. So one slightly complicated question. I asked all the developer advocates this so we could kind of get a better understanding of things. So Sebastian, you might have heard it before, but if you have to lead a culture shift in the ideology of how development happens now to a different kind of way of working, how would you go about doing that? Facilitating, hearing both sides, etc.
Please, Jan, go ahead. You're first.
Okay. Yeah, regarding needing to change from one approach to a different approach, if I understand the question correctly, and the difficulties that come with trying to find that intersection between something that has consensus, right? I would say that it's generally difficult. I don't know if it helps to to see if I can validate with you here, Christian, that I understand the question here correctly. But would an example of your question be like taking some form of legacy code maybe and needing to refactor or transform that into a new, more maintainable style of code base? Is that maybe an example?
Yeah, that's one example. The default I go to is Web 2 world has kind of perfected open source practice. Web 3 tends to have a centralized center of development here and there, kind of like what y'all were alluding to with a lot of closed source projects, stuff like that. And you got to train and change the methodology to adopt the Web 2 practice. But then also, if you're bringing in Web 2 devs, there's a Web 3 culture too that they need to adopt as well and learn how to commingle, because the community management in Web 2 is very straightforward. Whereas Web 3, you have this, what I call it, the anarchist angle, where everyone has some factor of how they want to disrupt the world, and they're very passionate about it. So you have a completely diversified but unified community to manage. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say that on the technical side of that, you tend to also. So I'm dealing with this a little bit just in my own, if it makes sense. I'm maybe that solo dev that I have worked well in groups in the Web 2 space, as you mentioned. We're generally pretty good at being able to work independently, have CI/CD. I think the big thing is bringing stuff like ideas like continuous integration and continuous deployment from the Web 2 space, like you're saying, and help to bring some of that collaborative coding experience into the Web 3 space. At the same time, I'm also struggling with the technologies that I use. I'm used to having a maybe even a single DigitalOcean droplet that's like the back end of my application and store data in a single database. So I'm also at the same time having to think of how I might develop an application in stages. And this is something that maybe we I don't know if it's all meant for this conversation. We should probably have a longer conversation about it. But if developing an application and working through, let's say, that growth phase, there may be a period of time where you have to make compromises that are not in line with either ethos exactly, but it's a stepping stone towards getting to that middle place of the Web 2 and Web 3, I think. And so that's what I'm sort of struggling with now is if I build a dApp, do I start by using centralized storage? Do I then move parts of my off-chain parts of my calculations and things that I do in my dApp, my ancillary data? How do I want to store that? How do I want to manage that? And sort of more of a Web 3 way. And then, yes, absolutely. How do I bring more Web 3 devs in on my project, which is right now closed source? But how do I start to share that more? How do I make parts of it open source? And then eventually, how do I make the whole thing open source so that we just have a group of community members that is able to openly contribute, that we can gate what code actually makes it into the code base in a safe way, and that of course the actual implementation and technical aspects of it can also be decentralized. I think that's sort of a golden ticket place to get to, but I also kind of feel like it might be a process. It's definitely going to be a process for me. And so I think understanding what that process looks like for projects is important. And this project incubation lifecycle framework might be a part of the roadmap that helps them get there. So I'm excited to help and be a part of that too, as I'm figuring it out. So.
Yeah, completely agree with John. I think we have in the ecosystem, we can see, I'm an advocate of collaboration on project, but the reason is because not only me, but my colleagues and all the many developers teams have had the opportunity to see the effects of the consequences of collaboration. For example, in my case, in our case, Gimbal Labs and Blink Labs, these two organizations, got together in a few months ago, and they start to explore how to implement Golang tools on Cardano, developing on Cardano based on Golang, right? But these kind of endeavors growth or initiate in just based on collaboration of these two teams, and we have some other experiments in the ecosystem in this moment. For example, Pragma. Pragma is a different MBO, different from Intersect, for example, and different with different goals than many other established organizations in the ecosystem. All these endeavors and all these organizations start from this need from the developers to build collaborations, and in the area of common goals. So I think talking about how we can fit the culture in some way, I'm of the opinion that we have to let the developers do their thing, and instead of establish some kind of protocol from the beginning to start from the beginning, we need to start to understand how the developers behave each other, and start to follow those invisible threads that at the end finish on several forms of collaboration. For example, as I said before, new projects and new organizations, and start to perceive some new ways to incentivize that kind of relationships. I think all starts from there, and in that way we can start the adoption of the open source adoption is more possible. Yeah. For a moment. Thanks a lot.
Cool. Thank you much. Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, cool.
Oh, okay.
Appreciate the answers.
Robin, I appreciate you making some time. I hate to put you on the spot, but as somebody who recently joined the committee and has been to a few meetings, any questions that you have for either of our potential candidates here?
Thanks for asking. Maybe give me a minute or two to think about it. I try come up with one, and I hope I don't repeat anything that has been asked already.
Hey, no worries. Repeating things is not a bad thing in this world, so all good. Let's see.
We could actually use that as a segue to talk about the dry principle if we wanted to. Yeah, I will just say I'm actually one of those developers that sort of downplays dry as being maybe one of the least important principles. So I don't know if that's controversial, but there we are.
You know, I'm an advocate of Ruby on Rails. That is very dry, but I don't disagree. It's probably not the most important principle.
I just find a lot of times there's other patterns that I use in my coding to nerd out a little bit here, but CQRS, command query responsibility segregation, you end up with a lot of classes. And a lot of those classes are they're just data structures. They're dumb data structures, but you type them to make sure that it's all, solid. The problem is you end up with a lot of code that ends up looking the same. I mean, with any boilerplate code, you end up with a lot of just sort of little repeated bits. And so, it is what it is.
All right. Well, I mean, I hate to have silence, but that also doesn't mean that we always have to be talking per se. But we do put it up there, so I don't want people to click on a video and they're like, "Wait, what? Nobody talking." um, but no, I mean, y'all have built some, I would say, or demonstrated some pretty strong interpersonal skills, especially being through each of these calls here. Anything that you're looking forward to either continue working on or celebrate as you get to work with others?
I would just like to say that I enjoyed the first working group meeting that I was a part of. I was mostly listening in. I've enjoyed the open source committee documentation knowledge base that I've gone through so far. I know that this Gitbook document, I'm sure, is a living document and is going to continue to change and morph over time. I also, if I can just jump in and say that one of the things that I think might be interesting is I'd like to understand more about, I hear concerns get brought up around transparency and the way sometimes documents or things kind of get created and, oh my gosh, this thing is just getting sort of sprung on the community, this and that. I don't know how much of that is true and how much of that is conjecture, but I would just like to see if there are important parts of our life cycle that need to have every part of the process tracked. If that's something that technically we need to build something in to make parts of our process more transparent. If that's something that is needed, I don't know if it is something that's needed, but if it is something that's needed, that's something that I would be interested in finding out about and seeing if I can help with. So.
It's definitely a great call out and something that, I mean, we ran a survey at the beginning of this year or late last year. Would love to see if we can get something like that out again to see if there are any gaps in terms of clarity or understanding when it comes to open source and the way that we plan to move forward. So I think running a survey like that would be super, super helpful. To address that concern, though, I would heavily state that a majority of the work, pretty much any and all of the work that has gone into the different policies or other documentation, as you refer to it, that's all happened inside of working groups that the OSC has overseen. So those are constantly back and forth, and it's just a matter of if you feel like you're missing something, then maybe you weren't as involved as you should have been or could have been. So I know that's kind of like a tit for tat kind of thing, but we definitely want to encourage the community to be involved. And we do everything that we can, at least from the open source side, to make sure that all of that is known, propagated, published, and shared wherever and whenever possible. But the thing to state would be is that there's not any use, at least as of now, to show like a backlog of that documentation. It's more so what the finished and polished policy looks like at the end of the day. So if you want to be part of the build, you got to be here for the build. That's kind of how that's going to work for now, anyway. So
that's my impression that I got now from the past few weeks that I've been joining meetings and seeing like processes and things happening. Is all in public, but I think what I think we could improve on is maybe the channel, not the channel, because the channels are there, but maybe more the awareness of the community, of the people, that these channels exist and that they can join, that they can listen in, that they can read up on things and decisions, and they can even be part of the decision making if they want to. And to, yeah, for them to understand that there is, they have a voice if they want to say something. And I saw, for example, the Twitter or X account of the committee is rather small, so the reach is not that big yet. So maybe we can do something about that and make it more a more known account for the future. Just one thing that I'm just having on top of my head right now, but maybe there's others.
I would just say that sounds like the problem stated very succinctly, because I would say almost entirely as soon as I learned about what's going on in terms of Intersect and was able to, it feels like as quickly as I'm able to digest the information is how quickly I'm diving into things. So I do feel like there's people out there that if they, in the Cardano community, if they might not all be aware of what Intersect is doing. And so getting that information out there, getting more people involved probably does help to take care of a lot of that transparency concern. So definitely.
Yeah, and I think, in my opinion, this could work through the open source projects, because there's intrinsic motivation there, because we want to help them, they want to help us. It should be like a cycle that helps each other and makes it all more public. I think I got a question for you. What do you think is or are the most important goals, or what are your most important goals as a committee member of the open source community? What do you really see? Where do you want to drive? I'm sorry, I cannot explain very well right now. What drives you in terms of open source, and what do you want to achieve?
I can definitely jump in on that, just because even though I recognize now, as I've spent more time in the open source committee, how much my involvement will probably encompass much more than what I was originally thinking that it might. But my focus has always been on I'm a PHP developer, and so I love the PHP community. I love that technology. I don't think PHP is the perfect programming language. I think it's the perfect platform. I think it's very hard, and there's not a lot of places where you can just throw an index.php file in a directory and bam, your website's up, you know. But that's how easy it is with that. And so I think having libraries and tools that tie Cardano and the PHP community and Web 2 together make that very easy, as somebody who's not in, maybe a developer who's coming from outside of Cardano but is involved in PHP, to easily make that leap over and make Cardano a top choice when it comes to integrating in Web 2 and a lot of that stuff. So that would be probably my main goal. Would be, I would like to see in the next couple of years Cardano, the name and the logo, show up in a lot of these places where it's not right now, and that would be places like the Symfony website and the Laravel website and some of those Web 2 frameworks. So
fantastic. Yeah. In my case, my interest is to bring developer teams around the world together, because we have all this capacity spread around the world without some clear communication between teams. And I think we can do something about it. I think again, I'm deep on education and collaboration and contribution, and how we can build together. Building together is a tenet of my work. So I think we can. We have a long way to go, but I think we can start to make better the way in which developer teams are related, and start better relationships. That's my main interest. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you both.
thank you.
All right. Well, if nothing else, we are getting down to the end of the time that we have for today. So I can pass this back to John or Sebastian if you'll have any final thoughts, and we'll close out our final session.
I'll just say that this entire election cycle thing has been really fun. I'm excited to get up to Austin and meet some people, and for the workshop and the annual members meeting. And I'm excited to jump into the next working groups and do whatever it is to help and continue to work on my project. I just want to thank everybody for their time, and look forward to seeing you guys and working with you in the future. Thank you.
From my side, this was a pleasure to know all of you, and I really appreciate that this opportunity to know people that I didn't know before, and know their interests and how they are able to offer his time, not only his time, their time, but their knowledge and talent, and put them at the service of others. This is really impressive to me each time, and I appreciate that for the well-being of the community and this common project we are building together. And thanks for the opportunity. This is a really good opportunity to be being part of something or participate actively in how all the things go. It's really exciting. And well, thanks a lot for that. Just, I really appreciate this situation. Thanks.
Awesome. Well, again, special thanks to John and Sebastian for not only attending one or more sessions, but attending every session. We really appreciate y'all being here to market your candidacy here. Special thanks to Robin joining in the last one here, again, a current committee member. And another special thanks to Laura for not only supporting the open source committee spaces and sessions here, but also many of the committee spaces and election meetings that have happened and taken place. So thanks once again, and we'll sign it off from here, but make sure to check the links in the description, and also check out the @Intersect OSO on X for any and all additional or remaining voting information. Have a good one.
John, you have my vote.